In 2023, the U.S. spent about $1.4 trillion on military programs. Given the amount of money the U.S. government allocates to military spending, it is not surprising that there have been some pretty shocking military experiments over the years. Fear is a significant contributor to military experimentation, and many of the operations on this list were born of the atmosphere of paranoia during the Cold War. From chemical testing to experimenting with animal allies, keep watching as we closely examine 5 of the most outrageous military experiments. Number 1. The Edgewood Arsenal Drug Experiments. In 1939, a Swiss researcher named Albert Hofmann began working on a chemical found in a fungus called ergot that grows on rye and grains. In 1943, he accidentally ingested a small amount of the substance and found that he began to hallucinate. He had, in fact, invented LSD. 3 days later, he intentionally took a larger dose, experiencing the world's first acid trip as he rode home on his bicycle. Fast forward to the 1950s, the CIA is on the lookout for any potential chemical weapons. The military wanted to investigate the impact of various drugs, and they chose to do so at the Edgewood Arsenal military facility in Chesapeake Bay. They planned to test the effects of over 250 different chemicals, including nerve gas, sarin, mescaline, amphetamines, and, you guessed it, LSD. The military doctors were hoping to find a chemical that could turn into a non-lethal weapon, something that would incapacitate the enemy without killing them. All they needed was volunteers. But who in their right mind would offer themselves up to be a human guinea pig for potentially dangerous chemicals? Well, no one, which might be why the Army asked volunteers to test uniforms and equipment instead. Between roughly 1955 and 1975, the Army performed tests on around 7,000 soldiers. Although the volunteers were exposed to a concoction of chemicals, the Department of Defense did not feel the need for any long-term follow-up of the subjects. In 1969, 20-year-old recruit Frank Rochelle volunteered to take a break after coming out of Army boot camp. But once he reached Edgewood, he and the other volunteers were told that the experiments were, in fact, drug tests. Many volunteers reported feeling there would be severe repercussions if they were to back out at this stage and felt that they had little choice but to comply. However, they were assured that the experiments were harmless and that their health would be carefully monitored. Unfortunately, as the doctors in charge were testing the safety of the chemicals, the reassurances were a lie. During one round of tests, Rochelle suffered 2.5 days of hallucinations, at one point trying to cut his freckles out with a razor. Rochelle was experimented on for 2 months, witnessing those who were testing gas masks being given faulty equipment and put in a gas chamber. While the DoD maintains that their experiments were perfectly consensual and humane, the veterans who underwent these tests tell a different story. Many of them were unaware of what drugs they were exposed to and were made to sign secrecy oaths. They were unable to get treatment since their ailments stemmed from classified experiments, which led to a class action lawsuit being filed on behalf of the Department of Veterans Affairs. Number 2. The Gay Bomb. While this may sound like a crazy conspiracy or something straight out of a sitcom, a Berkeley watchdog organization that tracks military spending uncovered details of this outrageous military experiment. According to the records, in 1994, the U.S. Air Force discussed the prospect of using potent aphrodisiacs as a non-lethal chemical weapon. This idea was expanded to explore the possibility of creating a chemical that would cause homosexual behavior, and the documents showed that $7.5 million had been requested to pursue the idea. Evidently, these highly paid military personnel thought that by causing the opposing army to become attracted to their comrades, they would simply stop fighting. As well as the idea of being able to chemically change someone's sexual preference being completely ridiculous, anyone who has studied Greek history will know that should this experiment have become a reality, it may have backfired spectacularly. In the 4th century BCE, a troop of elite soldiers consisting of 150 pairs of male lovers, called the Sacred Band of Thebes, was an incredibly efficient fighting force, defeating the renowned Spartan army. Number 3. Project Stargate. In 1972, the CIA received reports that the Soviet Union military was researching psychic phenomena as well as other fringe science. Not to be outdone, The CIA set up its own psychic program and contacted parapsychologists Hal Puthoff and Russell Targ to research potential military applications for various psychic phenomena. The pair decided that the most useful psychic path to go down was that of remote viewing, the perceived ability to project a person's consciousness anywhere in the universe and accurately observe people, objects, terrain, and events. The military loved the idea, as should this ability prove to be reliable, they would be able to spy on their enemy completely unperceived and gain a unique insight into the machinations of the Soviets. The Army began recruiting people who claimed to have extrasensory perception, or ESP, as remote viewers, intending to create, as Charlie Rose, a North Carolina congressman, put it, a hell of a cheap radar system. One of the first psychics that was recruited was Yuri Geller, an ex-Israeli paratrooper and professional spoonbender. But the Army was much more interested in his proclaimed mind-reading abilities than his manipulation of silverware. In the late 1970s, the program moved to Fort Meade in Maryland, now funded by the Defense Intelligence Agency. Surprisingly, the program did have its successes. Remote viewer Angela Della Fiora successfully tracked down a custom agent who had gone on the run. One of the more consistently accurate remote viewers was an Army veteran called Joseph McMoneagle. He was involved in around 450 missions between 1978 and 1984, including locating hostages and identifying a shortwave radio that was hidden in a calculator of a suspected KGB agent. But perhaps the strangest mind mission that McMoneagle was sent on was to Mars in the year 1 million BCE. He described unfamiliar pyramids and strange tall beings wearing unusual silk-like clothing. He said of the beings, "They're dying. It's past their time or age." McMoneagle reported being confused by what he was seeing and that he was seeing it in very fragmented pieces. All this might seem a bit comical, but McMoneagle did not know that he was supposedly viewing Mars in the past and thought that the target was on Earth. He had been given a sealed envelope to concentrate his effort on, which was not opened until after his remote viewing. The program was shut down in 1995 and cost the military $20 million. While this figure may not be much in terms of military spending, many believe that the project was shut down out of sheer embarrassment that they had pursued this operation for over 20 years. Number 4. Operation Acoustic Kitty. During the intense political tensions of the Cold War, the use of spies to gain intelligence reached its peak. You would expect good spies to show traits such as loyalty and obedience, which did not always spring to mind when thinking about cats. Nevertheless, in the 1960s, the CIA thought that cats would be the ideal animal to spy on Soviet embassies and even the Kremlin. The idea was to implant a microphone into the cat's ear, with a radio transmitter at the base of its skull. An antenna would then be woven into the cat's fur, allowing the CIA to listen to any conversation the cat was privy to. Operatives were confident that they could train cats to sit near foreign officials, their innate cuteness a cover for this cunning subterfuge. A suitable candidate was chosen to be the first undercover kitty, and a veterinary surgeon spent an hour implanting the equipment in the cat's head. The spy cat's first mission was to capture a conversation between two men on a bench in the park. After what we can only assume to be a thorough brief, the cat slunk into the park. Operation Acoustic Kitty, which would be an awesome band name, ended in ultimate failure when the cat abandoned its post and wandered into the road, where it was hit by a taxi. The driver, blissfully unaware that a $20 million military project had just been annihilated under the cab's wheels. Ultimately, the scheme was abandoned, with the CIA making the shocking discovery that cats are not especially trainable. Number 5. MK Ultra. In the 1950s, while the military was testing chemicals on soldiers at Edgewood Arsenal, the director of the CIA had approved another morally dubious military program called MK Ultra. Motivated by rumors of Soviet advances in mind control, are you beginning to see a pattern? The US government was determined not to fall behind in this high-stakes area of military expansion. MK Ultra intended to research how drugs could be used to induce hypnosis more easily, as well as enhance an individual's ability to withstand torture, and how they could be used as a non-lethal weapon to confuse and disorientate enemy soldiers. The experiment consisted of 162 secret projects, many of which were outsourced but directly and secretly funded by the CIA. Subjects were administered psychoactive drugs like LSD without consent, and were also subjected to hypnosis, electroshock, sexual and verbal abuse, isolation, sensory deprivation, and torture. Unlike the military personnel at Edgewood, the subjects of the MKUltra experiments could in no way be described as volunteers. In large part, they were prisoners, mental patients, prostitutes, and drug addicts. One agency officer reportedly described them as people who could not fight back. On a quest to find drugs that would help extract information or wipe a subject's mind clean, they also tested on CIA employees, doctors, government agents, and members of the public. Military personnel who were experimented on were threatened with court-martials if they ever mentioned MKUltra. Perhaps one of the most scandalous programs during MKUltra was Operation Midnight Climax, when sex workers were hired to lure men back to a CIA safe house where they would be secretly drugged, observed, and filmed. CIA agents also reportedly frequented bars where they spiked random people's drinks with LSD and then tailed them to observe the results. At least 2 people died because of this program. One was Harold Blower, a professional tennis player who had checked himself into the New York Psychiatric Institute while suffering from depression. While institutionalized, the CIA administered various forms of mescaline to Blower, including MDA and DMA. Blower requested that they stop giving him the injections, as he experienced intense hallucinations. But on the morning of December 30, 1952, he was injected with 450 milligrams of MDA. He experienced tremors, sweating, and frothing at the mouth before slipping into a coma and dying just over 2 hours later. The other subject to die was a U.S. Army biochemist named Frank Olson, who was given LSD without prior knowledge, and died after he plunged from a 10th-story hotel window in July 1953 while under the supervision of a CIA doctor. Despite these tragedies, the MKUltra experiments would continue for another 20 years. The program ended abruptly in 1973, when the military was so desperate to cover up the atrocities committed under the MKUltra program that they purposefully destroyed most of the records. A Senate hearing about the program in 1975-76 concluded the research and development program, particularly the covert testing programs, resulted in massive abridgments of the rights of American citizens, sometimes with tragic consequences. Despite the CIA's best efforts to destroy all records of the program, 8,000 pages of documents, mainly financial, were found in 1977. Causing further inquiries into the project. Although 2 lawsuits reached the Supreme Court in the 1980s, ultimately the court protected the government over citizens' rights, and nobody has ever answered for the human rights violations that took place during the MKUltra experiments. How would you like to get a deeper understanding of history, impress your friends, and predict the future more accurately based on past events? If this sounds like something you might be into, then check out the brand new Captivating History Book Club by clicking the first link in the description. To learn more about military history, check out our book, American Military History, a captivating guide to events and facts you should know about armed conflicts involving the United States of America. It's available as an ebook, paperback, and audiobook. If you found the video captivating, please hit the like button and subscribe for more videos like this.